We will now look at practice 4a, question 3a. Now in question 3a, just like example 1 that we've seen just now, you are given two triangles. However, the difference here is that the two triangles are not labeled. So you may find it a little bit difficult to compare the corresponding side. Alright, it's okay, never mind. We shall attempt to look for the corresponding sides by labeling the two triangles. Alright, let me call the first triangle ABC, and this triangle here triangle PQR, okay, for instance. So the first thing we want to do, okay, maybe to try to find corresponding angles, because that will help us, okay, and it's easier to find. So let's say I know this angle here is 75 degrees, so I call this, okay, vertex here A. Now, corresponding to A, I know is P. And if I look for 75 degrees in the next diagram, I realize it's here, so I label this corresponding side P. Okay, next, there are no other known angles on this side. Okay, so I can't rely on angles anymore. I will have to look at my side. So next, we can look at this side here. Okay, if you look at this line, this is 2.3. It corresponds to this side over here. So if I were to label the second point as B, okay, sorry about that, B will actually correspond to Q on the other side. So we know that the other point here must be Q. And therefore, we only have one point C left, and therefore the other side, okay, it corresponds to the point R. Okay, now if you cannot figure out how I've labeled the corresponding side, okay, you may want to pause and rewind the video again. Now with the corresponding sides, it will be a lot easier for us now to find the unknowns. Okay, we look at X. Now X we know is equals to angle R. And angle R, okay, if you look at the correspondent, angle R corresponds to angle C. So we know this is the angle C. And X degree is equals to 23 degrees. Therefore, X is equals to 23 without the units. Alright, so this allows us to find angle X quite easily. Okay, which leads us to find the angle Z. Now, the angle Z corresponds to the angle Q, okay, which in the other triangle, since they are congruent, will correspond to angle B, but we don't know angle B. So is there any way to find angle Z? Well, you know that X, Z, and 75 degrees are three angles of a triangle. So you can find Z by taking, okay, the sum of angle of a triangle, which is 180 degrees, minus 75 degrees, minus angle X, which we know is 23 degrees. And the reason is because this is angle sum of triangle. And if you work this out using a calculator, you will get 82 degrees. Therefore, if I leave out the units because I just want the value of Z, Z is therefore equals to 82. Which leads me now to find the last unknown Y. So I have to look at the last unknown Y. Okay, looking at Y here. Now we know Y corresponds to QR. And if we want to look for the corresponding side on the other triangle, QR will correspond to BC. So to find out Y, we need to look at BC, where BC is here, and is equals to 5.6. Therefore, we know the value of Y is equals to 5.6. So you can see that by comparing the corresponding side, you can actually very easily, okay, find unknowns in a triangle. Now let's go on now to try question 3b so that you get more familiar with this. Now in question 3b, again, you are given two unlabeled triangles and you're asked to find the unknowns. Okay, there is actually another unknown here, Y. Alright, so before we do that, like we did in the previous example, it may be actually easier to label, okay, the sides. Let me call the first triangle ABC again, and let me call this PQR again. Okay, so as I said before, easiest way is to look at known angles first. So we know this given angle here 105, and you realize that this point A here is where the two equal lines converge. So we look for the corresponding part in the other triangle since they are congruent. Okay, the point where the two lines of equal length converge is this point here. So we know this is point P. Okay, next. Now we know that this is actually an isosceles triangle. So for isosceles triangle, the two base angles are equal, so it actually really doesn't matter which side you label B and which side you label C. So correspondingly, you will get Q and R on this side. Okay, so the easiest one to identify would be angle Z over here because it corresponds to, okay, P, which corresponds to the point A. So we know that Z is equal to, or Z degrees is equals to angle P, which corresponds to angle A, which we know is 105 degrees. So therefore Z is equals to 105. Alright, we just want the value without the units. Then next, given that this is an isosceles triangle, okay, we know that the two base angles must be equal. We will be able to find X because we know that, alright, 2x, since this is also x degree, since it must be base angle, plus Z, which is 105, must give you 180. So 2x must actually give you 75, and therefore x must give you 37.5. So this allows us to find x easily. And the last unknown that's left is y. Alright, we know that y corresponds to the side PQ, and PQ corresponds to AB in the other triangle. And AB is actually equals to AC because of the fact that this is an isosceles triangle, and we know this is 6.5. Therefore, you get y is equals to 6.5.